AIDS brings a response
Fight
from the
against
government.
AIDS, the disease which claims life.
Welcome to AIDS: The Lost Voices with me, William Hampson. In this series, we journey through the decades to explore how Britain reported on the AIDS pandemic. We'll delve into the newspaper archives from the 80s, 90s and noughties, unearthing individual stories that reveal the human experiences behind the headlines. Join me as we seek to understand the complexities of a crisis that reshaped lives and challenged societal perceptions. Ready? Let's go.
Are you?
And now on BBC Two, Pattie Coldwell tells the story of one man's battle against AIDS. Remember Terry.
I mean, I have an illness which people sometimes tell me is going to kill me. I don't believe that, but people, it's a terminal illness.
You don't believe it?
Oh, no. Well, it might do in 30 years' time, but that's if I lay down and give in to it.
But you're not going to give in?
No, certainly not. I mean, I am quite convinced that the psychological state of someone with AIDS or someone with any terminal illness governs how long they live. I mean, I really enjoy my life. My enjoyment of life hasn't changed. And I've got lots and lots of things that I want to do.
Terry Madeley there, whose obvious love of life hit us right between the eyes, who saw him on Kilroy and Open Air during AIDS Week in the spring. He was the first man to come out on British television and admit that he had AIDS, and yet there he was, so bright and well-looking, so honest and funny, talking about his illness. He had an extraordinary impact on us. We had lots and lots of letters for him after the programme, and I became a personal friend of Terry's. I asked him if I could film his life with AIDS, which, if no cure would come up, we both knew would ultimately kill him. He agreed.
In February 1987, the four major TV channels available in the UK collectively dedicated a week to AIDS Week, during which they broadcast a range of programmes aimed at educating the public about HIV/AIDS. This initiative was notable not only for its comprehensive approach, but also for the competitive spirit among the channels, each striving to provide the most informative and impactful content. The broadcasts covered various aspects of the epidemic, including transmission, prevention, and the social implications of the disease, marking a significant step in raising awareness and reducing stigma surrounding HIV/AIDS in Britain at that time. And as we just heard at the outset of this episode, Terry Madeley spoke to Robert Kilroy-Silk on his Day-to-Day programme, which aired on BBC One on the 27th of February 1987, during what was then known as AIDS Week. Some newspapers then and others since have claimed that Terry Madeley was the first man in the UK diagnosed with AIDS to speak publicly about his condition. However, as I've said before, assigning such numbers, and in this instance firsts, retrospectively, is often unhelpful, and this case is no exception, because Bill Ayres, whom we covered in a previous episode, had already spoken openly and publicly about his AIDS diagnosis on Thames Television's TVI, which aired on the 28th of February 1985. Nonetheless, this does not diminish the significance of Terry Madeley's courage in 1987, speaking publicly about HIV/AIDS, even today in 2025, let alone 1987, remains a profoundly brave act, given the enduring stigma surrounding the condition. And I have to say, the sad part is that many that I spoke to that were a lot older than me, and I admit including myself, had never heard or vaguely remember the name Terry Madeley, despite the significant impact that Terry had on raising awareness around HIV/AIDS. And you could argue that times have changed, but I think generally in society these people do just get forgotten, because anybody who was infected or affected by HIV and AIDS really don't deserve any kind of memorialisation. Anyhow, this is why we're covering Terry Madeley in the Pride Month Icon series, because during his time, Terry achieved a level of recognition that saw him become somewhat of a celebrity. Journalist and TV presenter Pattie Coldwell met Terry during AIDS Week, and the two quickly became close friends as they documented his diagnosis and life with AIDS for BBC television. It was planned initially that the series would run for around 6 episodes, but tragically, Terry passed away as filming got underway, and in December 1987, the BBC aired a 1-hour programme from the footage that they had captured titled Remember Terry, which was met with widespread praise from critics for its heartfelt portrayal of his final months of life with AIDS. Here's television presenter Robert Kilroy Silk.
He was a celebrity, but he was a celebrity not just because of what he'd done and the disease that he'd got or the illness he had, but also because of his personality. Because he was so kind of full of life and energy and enthusiasm, and yet the man was slowly dying.
Good friend and neighbour, Dr. Richard Smith.
I'm not the only doctor who thinks that Terry did great things. I mean, after the programme he made with Robert Kilroy Silk, Mike Adler was on that programme too, and he said to Terry afterwards, you know, you've put the cause forward 10 years. And I think that's very true. I think we need to think back about just how much terror there was and how much rubbish there was in the newspapers. There isn't so much rubbish in the newspapers now, and I'm sure Terry is one of the reasons for that.
Dr. Caroline Bradbeer, one of Terry's doctors.
There was almost a fanfare before Terry turned up. In fact, I wrote in the notes on 2 occasions as part of the clinical findings. Once I wrote very famous, and the next time I saw him I wrote even more famous, I've noticed when I look back.
One of the earliest mentions of Terry Madeley in the British press that may hint at the beginning of his collaboration with Pattie Coldwell, who was already known for her thoughtful journalistic approach to health issues, ultimately leading to their joint efforts on the poignant and influential film Remember Terry, where the Manchester Evening News on the 11th of March 1987 reports, "Well, should you panic or not? Confused by the rash of AIDS programmes on television of late? That may not be entirely surprising, for even sympathetic AIDS presenters on rival channels have appeared to be at loggerheads over what action one should take. So shocked was fresh-faced Radio 1 disc jockey Mike Smith by research for his ITV show First AIDS, he announced he was dashing off for blood tests. With an air of aloofness, he says, quote, I have gone through enough and seen enough in the programme to just want to check, end quote. Oh, what a dickhead. Bad guidance, according to Pattie Coldwell, whose week conducting a special daily BBC phone-in on the delicate matter quite changed her mind. Quote, if I were worried, which I'm not, I'd take the advice from Open Air. Now, Open Air was a daytime talk show that did an AIDS special during AIDS week. Open Air and not go for a test unless symptoms showed. There's no need for most people to panic, end quote. Lanky twang Charlton-based Coldwell was so absorbed with death sentence victim Terry Madeley, she carried on interviewing him in a Manchester hotel almost until daybreak, long after her late-night show. Quote, I was nearly in tears talking to him, she says. Then, from Manchester to Bradford's Telegraph and Argos newspaper, the following day on the 12th of March 1987, under the headline, AIDS victim to allay public fears, where the article states, AIDS victim Terry Madeley will be in Bradford tomorrow to talk about his experience of the disease. Terry, who has been given 9 months to live, appeared twice on television during AIDS week. As he is now such a well-known figure, he has to be accompanied by an escort for his own protection. During his short stay in Bradford, he hopes to dispel public fears which make this kind of precaution necessary. He will be interviewed by Telegraph and Argos health reporter Kathy Stott. He will also appear on a Pennine radio phone-in when listeners will be able to put questions to him. Quote, Terry insists all questions must be allowed, even if someone asks what it's like to be dying, end quote, said a Pennine spokesman. And that interview that was alluded to there with Bradford's Telegraph and Argos health reporter Kathy Stott was printed on the 14th of March 1987 under the headline, Courage of an AIDS Sufferer, with the strapline, Message of Hope from Brave Terry, where it reads, the message to Bradford people from AIDS sufferer Terry Madeley in his first ever newspaper interview is, quote, never run the risk. No one wants AIDS and it's in your power to prevent it, end quote. To those already infected, he says, quote, be positive. Never accept that you're going to die and remember your own worth, end quote. He caught the disease 6 years ago, but it took until last summer to develop. Doctors have given him 2 years to live. Terry, a 41-year-old Londoner who was featured on television during the recent AIDS week, talked frankly to the Telegraph and Argos and Pennine Radio in Bradford yesterday in an attempt to dispel public fears about the disease. He comes across as a lively, cheerful man, though he admits to bouts of depression and tears. Quote, "A positive mental approach is so important. I've seen people without my attitude and they've gone under." End quote. Terry has to take 18 different pills a day to keep infections at bay. These make him feel drowsy, so he recently stopped taking one variety. As a result, he caught tuberculosis, from which he is still recovering. It's just one of the many difficulties an AIDS sufferer faces daily. When Terry was told he had AIDS at St Thomas Hospital, London last year, the first person he had to tell was his lover, Peter. They have been faithful to each other for 6 years, so Terry knew he had caught the disease after a previous one-night stand. Quote, "We went home and had a good cry," he says. To date, Peter has not been infected, proving that AIDS is easy to avoid and hard to catch. The next day, Terry made his will and began to sort out finances. He sold his flat to remove the money burden and moved in with his lover. He had already given up his job as an actor. It had become too exhausting, even before his AIDS had fully developed. The next task was to tell his mother, Lil, who accepts his homosexuality. Quote, "She was sitting in a chair. I knelt beside her, put my head in her lap, and she let me have a good cry. Then she said, 'Right, now we start fighting this.' She was marvellous." End quote. Since then, Terry has crammed all he can into life. He had some savings and so has been able to travel abroad. He also went on a weekend course to learn telephone counselling with the London-based help group Body Positive and is now one of their regular counsellors, helping both men and women face their AIDS infection. His doctor was approached by the BBC and asked if she would appear on television. Quote, "She said if anyone was going to put across a positive image, it was me. I discussed it with my mother, my sisters and their families and decided I wanted to do something positive, so I agreed. I hope I've made someone think twice about having casual sex. If one person's life is saved, I've achieved something lots of humans never get the chance to do," he says. The publicity means Terry is recognised in the streets. Although he has not yet had a bad experience, he is now accompanied everywhere by a friend. In fact, all the letters following his television appearance have been sympathetic, unless the BBC is keeping the truth from him. Quote, "I had one marvellous letter from an elderly couple. In it, the woman said her husband would not have anything to do with it, until he saw me on television. Now he sends his love." End quote. Naturally, there are people who criticise Terry's lifestyle, saying he is to blame for what has happened. He replies, quote, "The question is, do I deserve this? I don't think any human being deserves illness. I believe in a God, but I don't believe in a biblical God of wrath." End quote. He says, quote, "The heterosexual community is now at the stage the gay community was 3 years ago. They're getting far more information than we ever did and so are standing a better chance of fighting AIDS." End quote. He advises people, quote, "We're all better off without one-night stands, but if everyone else is doing it, you want to as well. I talk to people and they say they can't use condoms. What that means is they won't. But you've got to get used to it if you're going to have casual intercourse." End quote. Experts predict that in 10 years' time, we will all know someone with AIDS. Terry's advice is, quote, "Give them all the love you can. If they want to cry, let them. Cry with them even. It's one of the best ways of expressing sympathy and is a wonderful outlet for your feelings." End quote. Then, on the 29th of June 1987, Terry appeared on BBC's The Wogan Show alongside Sister Jackie Elliott, who was at the time in charge of the Broderick Ward, the UK's first AIDS ward at London's Middlesex Hospital. Here's Pattie Coldwell and Terry to tell us how it went, along with Terry's partner, named only as Peter, giving us an insight into one of those holidays that we heard about in the previous interview.
As an actor, Terry never achieved the stardom he wanted, but what should have been his biggest moment of TV fame didn't quite work out as he hoped. Mike Smith was in the chair that day.
My guests tonight are Sister Jackie Elliott and Terry Madeley. Jackie, good evening. Now,
The Wogan show, which didn't live up to my expectations, and as Jackie Elliott and I were walking down, I heard the warm-up comedian, if ever there was a misnomer, saying to the audience that when Jackie and I were on, they mustn't clap or laugh. And, you know, I mean, if I couldn't laugh, and if people can't laugh at me or with me, then, you know, there's no point to life.
This summer, Terry was determined to live it up. He decided to blow his life savings on a series of holidays, a trip to sunny Spain, and the holiday he and his partner Peter had planned for years. The Big Apple in style.
It was like two little schoolboys doing something for the very first time. And it was just super.
Be a part of it, New York, New York.
QE2 out, so that we would get the panorama of New York going into it, and Concord back. Waldorf Astoria in the middle. Up the Empire State Building, round Central Park, you name it, and we went there.
Up in the city that doesn't sleep.
We had a table with 4 Americans. Amy was 78 and Alice wasn't letting on. They thought the world of Terry, as you can imagine. And he held court for the voyage. Couldn't have been better.
That trip to America was Terry's dream holiday. He was so excited about it. He sent me this card. Having an artistic time here in New York, the crossing was unbelievable and we just adore luxury. If we keep this pace up, we'll need another holiday to recover. Hope you're well and happy. Love, Terry and Peter. In fact, they did have another holiday planned. He and Peter were going off to Spain at the end of August. There was a lot of chaos at the airport. So I got back from holiday and rang him up to wish him well. What I heard was a very different Terry. He sounded weak and depressed, and he told me he wasn't going on holiday, but in fact, he was going into hospital. And I went into that hospital, I admit, being rather frightened about what I might see. I'd been warned that he'd been terribly ill, so ill that he'd openly discussed committing suicide, which, coming from Terry, was a shock to us all. I dreaded the prospect of seeing him fading away. I remembered those graphic television images of poor men dying from AIDS, yet I simply couldn't believe that could happen to Terry. But that day I was about to learn that the course of AIDS is totally unpredictable. Hello, Chuck.
Hello, Chuck.
You've let me down.
Hello, brighten your day, love. How are you?
Oh, I love the earrings.
Oh,
I thought you were going to be wearing your strawberry pyjamas.
I've got one, love.
Oh,
I'm half better.
Right, your begonia.
Oh, no,
Terry discovered he had AIDS 14 months ago when a rare and incurable form of TB was diagnosed. Because his immunity is low, he's on drugs to fight the TB. He's an asthmatic, he has a low blood count, which weakens him, and he has thrush in the mouth and cold sores. But the only visible signs of illness are his weight loss and the occasional cough. All these symptoms made him very depressed. What's been wrong?
It started in Menorca. I went into this blissful little church right up on the mountain. And I'm not religious. But some churches have got something in them and some haven't. Some are banks and markets, and some have some spiritual quality which I recognise. I sat in this church and I looked up and I said, if there's anyone here, I just want you to know that I either want a complete cure or I want it over with now. Like now.
And that was when you could feel that you were getting really ill.
And that's when I thought to myself, something is much wronger than it's been before. And I'm not frightened to die. I'm not frightened of dying. I'm frightened of the process that I've watched these people go through. You know, I've seen, one friend who's been a friend since I was about 23, you know, who was demented, blind. You know, we're talking about a 38-year-old guy.
He has had a dreadful down. He's been very, very low. He's been so low that, in fact, we worried that there might be something going on in his brain, that he might have some brain infection, which goes with AIDS, which was causing this change in his personality.
I didn't realise that I looked that bad, because the mouth was still working. I mean, you know, they're going to have real problems writing out my death certificate, because I'll still be talking. I mean, like, you know, I've got to remember the list, you know, for the answers and explanations I want when I get up there, you know. Because I tell you, if I get up there, it's me asking the questions. Excuse me, love.
What are you up to?
Terry gets off his hospital bed to close the door to his private hospital room.
What are you doing?
Well, I know I shouldn't, but there comes a time, love.
Oh, Terry, you're not still smoking.
Oh, they're ever so mild. And I've only had 2 today.
And then sits on the toilet while sparking
did the hospital
up.
say about you smoking?
Well, what do hospitals ever say about anybody smoking? No, I have to do it in here because there's a fan. I know it's naughty, folks, but... I mean, what am I going to be, a neurotic AIDS victim who doesn't smoke? Or a well-adjusted person with AIDS who does?
Terry tries very hard to be the life and soul and to ignore his illness, but there's a big psychological element to his illness at the moment, I think. He's just coming to realise really very late his own mortality, because he's been playing games for a long time with us and with himself. It's his way of coping.
Have I shown you the equipment?
You have not, Terry.
Would you like to see my equipment?
I'd love to.
But the cabaret has got to change. I'll never be anything but an entertainer. But I've got to stop doing the, hey folks, I'm coping, I've got AIDS and I'm coping. You put it on like this, and then you turn on the oxygen, but I won't because of you smoking. And then you breathe through it, love. Have a breathe through that.
What, so this is when you were really suffering?
Yeah. It helps you to breathe. It's
Can you
a
catch
drug.
asthma?
No, I don't think you can catch anything of what I got, love.
So you were using that a lot, though, were you?
Every 4 hours, I still am. But they've cut out the 2 o'clock in the morning one. But this is real big old stuff, love. Look at this. Look at it.
What's that one?
This is a bombing raid one. You have to wear this for 8 hours, and you get free membership of the Red Arrows.
See, you can see he's quite the character, quite the entertainer. But aside from Terry's partner, known only as Peter, he had the love and support of his mother, something many diagnosed with HIV/AIDS were often denied, as families frequently disowned them regardless of gender or sexual orientation. Terry, faced with the double challenge of being both gay and diagnosed with AIDS, which was once dubbed the gay plague, was fortunate in that his mother, Lil, born in 1914, fully accepted him. This rare acceptance was publicly shared when the pair appeared on the TV programme Day to Day with host Robert Kilroy Silk, highlighting the loving support of a mother during those difficult times.
Terry's had dozens of visitors in hospital, but few more devoted than his 74-year-old mum, Lil.
I've known Terry was gay for a long, long time, probably before he realised he was. If you know what I mean, don't you?
Well, mothers always know their sons better than anybody else.
Of course we do.
What do you think about the future and Terry? I mean, the amazing thing for me is you're both so cheerful. I can see where he gets it from now.
Why should we be miserable? If it's got to happen, it'll happen. No matter what you or the doctors or I say or push. It's not like a screen down that we can push away or push up out the way, is it?
No.
It's going to stay there. So we've got to make the best of it while we can.
I think you're a lovely mum, love.
Oh,
you look after yourself. Terry. The future? What do you think about the future?
I think you should put my mum on the National Health, Mr.
What's bloody marvellous about standing up for your own son? What is there marvellous in it? Isn't it the sort of thing you should do if you're a real mum? Well, perhaps that's just me saying it, but that is how I look at it, Pattie. If your mum can't stand up for you, who will? I used to put it down the fact that he was with women, me, my mother, and 2 daughters. He was just a little bit effeminate because he was with women all the time.
I'm a textbook case of a gay man. My obnoxious father was in a sanatorium. He had TB, ironically enough. And when he came home, he just nicknamed me the sissy boy. I mean, I was 2.5, for God's sake.
When Terry grew up, it was easy for him to be openly gay, especially with a supportive mum like Lil, and in the jobs he chose, hairdressing, then acting. Professionally, he preferred the comic roles and was a real favourite with the kids in Panto. Privately, he never saw himself as promiscuous. He believes he caught the AIDS virus 6 years ago, when the dangers of gay sex were unknown and AIDS hadn't even been identified.
I did a very long tour, and during the course of that tour I had a one-night stand, and I think that was it. But I do regard it as useless information. I mean, I would never think of suing. It's ridiculous. And, you know, the guy might be dead, or the guy might be very ill now, in which case I would just go and visit him and be sympathetic in the way that I am for other people.
So you contracted AIDS, you think, 6 or 7 years ago, and then you settled down with your lover, didn't you?
That's right. We decided that we wanted to be monogamous. We didn't want any kind of open relationship. We wanted it to work on that level. And it certainly did. I mean, you know, we had a good sex life, and...
And yet you never caught it?
No. Thank God.
Terry documented some of his experience in writing, which appeared in the British Medical Journal in August 1987, in which he shared his written testimony detailing the early symptoms he experienced before undergoing a HIV antibody test, a moment he recorded with candour, highlighting the mixture of apprehension and hope that accompanied the process, where he wrote... 6 years ago, last December, I'm assuming this must be 1980, 1981, I started to feel unwell, with fatigue, nausea, diarrhea, and weight loss. Being homosexual, I took myself off to my GP, thinking I had hepatitis or glandular fever. He did blood tests and over 6 months discovered I had a very low platelet count and recommended that I attend the haematology department at one of London's teaching hospitals, which I did for the next 4 years. Every time I visited the hospital, I asked if I had AIDS. At that time, I didn't know that there was something called HIV infection. I knew only about AIDS. No one ever explained the difference, but they did continually assure me that I definitely did not have AIDS. But being gay and aware, I was very worried. Finally, in September 1985, I was given the HIV antibody test, which proved to be positive. Then I was transferred with the speed of light to the sexually transmitted disease clinic, for which I shall always be most grateful. At the clinic, the doctors, nurses and counsellors answered my questions. They explained that I had the AIDS-related complex and that all the nagging little things that were bothering me were due to that. They put me in touch with Body Positive, a group of men who are all HIV positive, and organised themselves into a support group for anyone finding themselves in a similar position. I went on a counselling weekend and was well informed and felt so good being surrounded by 40 people in the same state as myself. I was reassured and realised that I wasn't a leper. I continued visiting the clinic until, in June 1986, I became ill. I was breathless, could hardly walk 25 yards and had acquired an uncomfortable dry cough and a dreadful wheeze. Immediately, my doctor had me admitted and began a series of tests. In the main, it was actually very pleasant. I had my own room, no restrictions on visitors, and a fabulous view. The tests were the usual blood and urine tests, and finally a bronchoscopy under a general anaesthetic. This was due to take place on a Thursday morning. Because of my HIV antibodies, I had to be the last in the operating theatre so that the theatre instruments could be thoroughly sterilised. Oh, surely they'd be sterilised anyway. Before this, I was sent for an examination of my lungs in the nuclear medicine department. I had had this examination before, when I had been asked to take part as though I would be helping in an experiment and had been told that there would be no results. This time, while lying on the table having my lungs scanned, I overheard the man operating the machine say to the doctor, who had just injected me, quote, "The PCP is not a lot worse," end quote. I cannot describe the fear and despair which took hold of me. AIDS was a terrible killer disease that happened to those, quote, promiscuous, end quote, gays who had at least 40 sexual partners a night. I knew that was true. I had read it all in the News of the World. He's been sarcastic, a sassy bitch. Certainly, you had to be a lot more promiscuous than me. After all, I had lived with my lover in a monogamous relationship for 5 years. I couldn't have AIDS. Anyway, my lover was HIV negative, so the strain of the virus I had couldn't be the killer one. But that overheard remark made me very frightened. What could I do? Who could I turn to? I was alone and stranded in this hospital and about to be put under an anaesthetic. Luckily, I didn't know much about the rest of the day, but at 6 a.m. the following morning, I was awoken by the sound of rustling plastic and opened my eyes to be confronted by a nurse in boots, plastic apron, hat, and rubber gloves. I wanted to die, there and then. When she returned 20 minutes later, I asked why she was dressed in this weird outfit and was told that she had the right to protect herself. I replied that I also had a choice and I chose not to be cared for by an ill-informed and insensitive nurse. Do you know, you can just imagine Terry saying this in that kind of Kenneth Williams-esque voice. And isn't it weird that something really quite sad and tragic and stigmatising, he actually just makes it sound funny, but it's not funny at all, is it really, when you think? That salutary little experience was, fortunately, the only one I remember. I hasten to add that the hospital went to great lengths to educate its staff, and this would never happen now. Moreover, my reaction proved to me that I had started fighting. Oh, love it. The consultant and his colleagues promised to tell me all their results on the Friday evening. True to their words, they arrived in full force at 4:45 p.m. I was told the whole truth. I had insisted on that from the beginning, and that's what I got. Not bluntly or coldly, but caringly and sympathetically. I felt sorry for the poor guy telling me. I had PCP, TB, CMV, herpes, and, I'm going to butcher this, cryptosporidiosis. Jackpot! He said that as cotrimoxazole would lower my platelet count still further, they would concentrate on curing the TB and the other things and leave the PCP to see how it developed. PCP being the acronym for pneumocystis carinii pneumonia. But the good news was that I could go home for the weekend and return to hospital on Monday morning to start the treatments. They left, and my doctor from the sexually transmitted disease clinic stayed to see how I had taken this news. When we were alone, I remember asking if I was now being treated as someone with AIDS. Her answer was yes. My next question was, how long? I didn't want to die, but there were so many things I wanted to do, and I wanted to know for how long I would be able to travel and do things. After all, I didn't feel so ill. Very, very reluctantly, she said that I had 2 good years, but it was up to me, and it was really impossible for her to say, and anyway, she didn't deal in death sentences. I had told my lover that if the news was good, I would be dressed and ready to leave when he arrived. This I forgot in my haste to dress, pack, and get out of the hospital. As he walked into my room, his eyes lit up and started to look happier than he had for weeks. I wanted to cry, for him, not for me, but instead I shouted, quote, "No, it's not good news. I've got it, but let's get home," end quote. Without being over-sentimental, I will try to tell you about that weekend. It is almost more relevant to my present good health and positive mental state than all the drugs, both allopathic and holistic, that I have swallowed since. We arrived home and we fell into each other's arms and we cried. We cried for many reasons. Because we'd hurt each other in the past, because we needed to reconfirm our love, because we needed the outlet, because we were frightened, and lastly, because I had AIDS. Afterwards, as things looked a little brighter, I vowed I would never cry for myself again. That would be a difficult decision to keep, so I mentally enumerated all the good things in my life. I knew that they would outweigh anything bad, including AIDS. We went out to dinner that evening with 2 close friends. We told them and they cried, but we had a marvellous dinner. Do you know, you can just imagine Terry. I mean, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but you can just imagine Terry, even from the clips that we've heard of thus far, that you can just imagine him breaking the news, then bawling their eyes out, him rolling his eyes and asking for the dessert menu. Anyhow, it goes on to state, the following day I went to tell my mother, while John, occasionally we hear of John, which is a pseudonym for Peter, and I found in subsequent documents that his partner was actually called Peter. John went to tell his parents. Some of you have seen my mother on TV with me. Her common sense, strength and love are a huge part of my fighting determination. Obviously, my relationship with Lil had been growing for 41 years and still is, just as it is with my sisters and with all my friends. I never experienced rejection, just unconditional support, sometimes from surprising sources. On the Sunday, John, real name Peter, my mother and Karen, my young sister who has Down syndrome, went to Leeds Castle for the day. It was a fabulous day, not the weather. It rained on and off all day, but the joy of living just filled me. I couldn't be dying. I had so much to live for, so much to do. How could I cause John, Peter, and Lil so much grief? I didn't know how, but I knew very early on that I decided to fight, and if I did die, I would do it fighting, and with dignity, but not yet. All that was 10 months ago, and each minute has been wonderful. I even enjoyed admitting it on a TV programme that I had AIDS. Knowing that my mother was there with me, that my lover and my sisters were in the green room, gave me the strength that made me want to help other people with AIDS in a worse situation than myself. I have only been in hospital once and have discovered homopathy. Scoff if you like, but do you have any of the real answers either? I feel good in myself and about myself, and I keep taking the pills and reject no offer of help without discussing it with all the people who are trying so hard to help me and others in the same position. My relationship with John, Peter, is growing daily, and our sex life, although completely safe, is good and frequent. I live with myself better than in the past. I've never had any problems with being gay, and I now think I'm quite a well-adjusted human being. As my doctor once commented, many people with AIDS become what they always wanted to be. Perhaps, but I still worry about the black bag at the end, and then I have to remind myself that I won't be there to feel the zip being done up. Occasionally, I worry about becoming demented, and then again remind myself that I wouldn't know much about that either, so that's another problem solved. Things are moving forward, not slowly, but really quite quickly. People with AIDS are admitting it and not hiding away, lying to friends and relatives. I personally cannot regret being homosexual, and therefore I cannot negatively regret about having AIDS.
Terry's partner, Peter, has been a constant support throughout his failing health. Peter prefers not to be identified because, unfortunately, in his profession, unlike Terry's, fear and prejudice still exists against gays and AIDS.
The shock came when he was HIV positive. The bottom fell out of my world.
Why didn't you leave him, Peter?
Consider a married couple, one of whom has cancer. You wouldn't expect the other person to leave them. And it's just the same. Terry had a terminal illness, and for the first time in his life he really needed someone to look after him, to care for him, to love him. And I happened to be that person.
My mum's good for when you want to have a cry. She drags herself up here every day. And, you know, when I'm grumpy, I tell her to go home. I don't want to speak to her. And she says, oh, don't you want me here anymore? I said, well, no. And, you know, and then I tell her how marvellous other people on the ward are. And then I think, oh, did I tell her she's marvellous as well? You know, because she is. I don't know if she's actually exceptional, but she's my mum. That's all I've got.
It's quite a journey, but I don't mind that. If it makes him feel better, then I'm there. That's what I'm here for, Pattie. After all, he's mine. If it was one of the others, I'd do the same thing, wouldn't I? So, I mean, what I do for Terry is done with all the love in the world. I wouldn't change him anyway. Nothing of him.
Lil and Terry's relationship is extraordinary. She herself has had 2 heart attacks and a stroke, and yet she's visited him almost every day he's been in hospital. A round trip of 2 hours, 4 buses, and a walk at each end. But recently, the pressure of Terry's illness has started to tell on him. When she turned up one day last week, they had a row. For the first time in their 41 years together. They were both very shaken by it.
Just feel so ashamed about it, but I mean, I actually feel ashamed because of her reaction, because I was totally unreasonable to her. You know, I mean, she walked in and I have these pastils because I suffer from candida. And they leave a residue, and if you're not careful and go and wash your mouth, you've got all this muck round your mouth. And she walked into the room and she said, "You've got stuff round your mouth, wash your mouth."
And he went over to picked up his flannel, turned round and glared at me, and I could only call it a glare. I've never seen Terry look like that. He looked at me, "What about you?" he said. "You come up here finding fault with me just because I've got a tablet up. It's only because I'm having medicine. Look at your blouse, it's got all white marks on it." And I looked down, I hadn't got any mark on me, but he was determined that he was going to make me in the wrong because I'd spoken about this, and I've never seen him do that before.
I burden her with all my problems. Her who's got quite enough of her own. And what does she do? She sits on the bed, she cuddles me like I'm a little boy, and she never cries. She never shows what she must be going through. And that's better than any psychiatrist. But she always says that words are like nails. You can bang them into lumps of wood, and with the other side of the hammer you can pull them out, but they leave holes.
How do you feel today?
Oh,
I'm lovely, aren't I? And I always lovely.
listen.
What, dear?
I want to apologise to you for last week.
Well, last week's done and forgotten with. Just because you made me break me heart. Good
well,
job,
I was
Karen
breaking
wasn't
mine, so I do see why.
Yeah, but mine lasted all the way until I got home as well.
But what they've done is all them pills that made me. I mean, I do think that the pills made me go a bit funny.
Oh yes, I've never seen it. Well, I mean, I've seen you funny, but not that
I'm
funny.
not denying that I was depressed and low, but I think the pills pushed me over the edge. I lost all the control. I wasn't coping like Lil brought us up to cope.
No.
So now listen. No, seriously, you're all right.
I'm fine.
Have you been crying?
Have I been? What have I got to cry for?
I don't know, but you have been crying.
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
You have.
I haven't. Yes, I've been laughing. That's when my tears roll. What have I got to cry for? Really and truly, if I could spend 23 and 24 hours up there with him, I would. But as I'm a bit tied up at home, I don't. My Karen is mentally handicapped. She was born a Mongol. But she's a very sweet Mongol. She isn't one of these aggressive children. She's very sweet, very loving, very adaptable. You can sort of get round her if you have to. But I mean, she worships Terry. If I say you're going to see Terry, then that makes her. She can't get there quick enough, you know.
Oh, hello, sweetheart. Hello, darling.
Have you had a nice day?
Yes, darling.
And she goes straight in, arms round him and kisses him. Hello, darling. And she absolutely adores him. Is that heavy? Shall I take it?
Yeah, you may.
Oh, I'm ever so good to you.
You may take the coat from me, please.
Oh, okay.
Darling.
How old were you when Karen was born?
47.
47.
Old enough to know better.
And what was your reaction when you discovered that she had Down syndrome?
Well, once again, Pat, it's something you've got to accept, haven't you? I mean, I couldn't do anything about it once she was born. I had plenty. The doctor told me plenty of times that I should have had an abortion. And I said, no way. I said, my second husband was very good to my first three. Why shouldn't he have one of his own to spoil? Which we did, and we have.
But you're so cheerful, Lil, about
What's the
this?
good of being miserable, Pattie? There's enough misery in the world without me adding my two penny. If I want to be miserable, I can go in my bedroom and have a good howl. Who's that for when you finished it?
I told you.
Who did you tell me?
Terry.
For Terry, I think he's got enough. Does he like pink and white?
Yeah.
He doesn't.
He does.
It's the girls' colours.
I know.
They
Doesn't
are.
matter, does it?
Oh, it doesn't really matter, no.
No.
No, if you like that sort of thing, it's up to you.
Yeah.
But he'd like it because you made it, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
But you're lovely with it.
Yeah, thank you. You're handsome.
Oh, thank you so much. Men are handsome, ladies are beautiful.
Beautiful.
Yeah. No, beautiful, not beautiful.
Beautiful.
Sounds like a drink.
So how do you see Terry's future? What do you think is going to happen now?
I tell you, he's coming back. He's coming out of that hospital. We'll have so much to thank that hospital for and that lovely doctor. And he'll come back and he'll be fighting. And he'll fight all the way and he'll get to the top of his profession. He's got to, Pat. He's got to.
And what if he doesn't come through?
It's the end of my world, Pattie. Oh, shut it, you're making me do what I don't do. My Terry's coming back. There's no two ways about it. I can't do without him. If nobody else needs him, I do. I'm sorry. I love that boy, Pattie. I love him so much.
But the harsh reality is that as yet no cure for AIDS exists. Only some hope from this drug, AZT. It can halt the progress of the virus, but it's very expensive, £5,000 per patient per year. And 1 in 4 patients on AZT get anemia, which involves total blood transfusions. So Terry had reservations about taking it.
What was really the true thing that was bothering him, which was that that was the only hope that he had. And he didn't want to risk trying it in case it didn't work, and then he was left with nothing. He wanted to sort of keep it up his sleeve as a possibility, as something that he could fall back on.
The impression you get about AZT is that it's a bit of a shot in the dark, that it has bad side effects, and that you can't know whether it works or not. So why are you giving it to Terry?
It's certainly true that it has side effects, and side effects are worse the iller the patient is. In patients who are actually quite well to start with, they don't seem to get very many side effects. So it's something that you want to give sooner rather than later.
It was marvellous to have Terry out of hospital. He spent a quiet few days convalescing at home, and he decided to go ahead with the AZT, which would take 6 weeks to work. A week later, he joined me for a dinner party where he was on excellent funny form. His boyfriend rang me up the following day and said he was delighted. He seemed so happy, back to the original Terry. I went back to work optimistic, and then found this note on my desk 3 days later. It was from Lil, Terry's mum. Terry is back in hospital. I could hardly believe it. It's hard to explain how difficult it was for all the people around him to deal with his real ups and downs. 1 minute so well, and the next minute very ill, back in hospital.
Can you imagine the worst kind of flu you've ever had, you know, when everything, multiply it by 10. Physically, I mean, at the moment, I feel very, very rough.
You're looking very thin to me.
I've lost 2 stone.
Since when?
Since January. But I've lost like 1.5 stone since August. I've just got no appetite. The drugs take my appetite away. They make me feel nauseous.
But don't you force yourself to eat?
I can't. I just can't. I mean, I do try.
So what do you weigh now?
9 stone 4 ounces.
And you, how tall?
6'2". I'd get a job with the GP though.
Why?
Carrying telegraph wires across.
Now, Terry, we came 2 weeks ago, and you were really well. You were going out of hospital, you were optimistic, everything was great. And then next thing I hear, you're back in hospital again. And last night, your lover phoned up and was just really, really sad, and he was convinced you were giving up.
But that doesn't mean to say that my wanting to die has changed.
Do you want to?
Yes.
Do you?
Yes, quickly.
Do you mean from now?
Yesterday, I've already said it, haven't I, that someone said if there was a button in front of you that you could press and you'd die like that. That's not changed. I'd press that button with no hesitation at all. I would. I'm not frightened of death. I'm not going to meet Mr. Anderton after I'm dead, or his God. What can I say? I'm not depressed, but the quality of my life is so low. And I think that, I mean, it's all very heroic when people stumble around and look like victims, or, you know, the caricature press victim. But that's not for me. It's not vanity or anything. If life doesn't have quality, then I don't see the point of life.
But you can't press a button, Terry, can you? So
No.
how are you going to deal with it if you get worse and worse?
Well, I'm not going to keep allowing people to give me these incredible medications with these toxic side effects. I'll stay with the AZT, but I don't see the point of hitting this TB that I've got so hard. You know, because outside them lungs is a human being.
Then Pattie Coldwell in the BBC film Remember Terry captures Terry in a candid conversation with his doctor, Dr. Caroline Bradbeer, where Terry expresses his concerns about the side effects and effectiveness of some of the medications he is currently prescribed. He discusses his desire to reduce or stop certain drugs.
What about if I decide that I don't want to take them?
Well, I think that would be stupid.
Why?
Because I don't think I think you might die if you didn't take them.
So?
Well, we're hoping we can make you better, aren't we? I mean, we haven't come to that sort of situation yet.
You sure?
Yes. I don't think you're dying. Not at the moment. But I think I'm worried if we stopped you having these drugs, that the TB would spread and it would make you go downhill very quickly. As I've said to you before, it's a poor, it's bad prognosis if you've got it at all. And it looks as though you've had it for about 14 months, so you're really living on borrowed time anyway. Because
if I decide, if I go off those pills and my temperature doesn't go up, there is no way I'm going back onto them in 2 days' time.
the chest physicians here who look after him while he's an inpatient have felt that he's really not got at all a good prognosis at the moment unless the AZT can do some good. They feel that he won't be able to fight this infection by himself, with or without our drugs, without some boost to his immune system, and that's why we're giving him the AZT in an attempt to help his immune system to help itself to get rid of this form of TB.
But it's no cure, is it?
It's no cure.
If it's the time to die, then you might as well do it.
Do you feel it is the time to die now?
I'm not sure, but if I was given a choice, then yes, I would go. I wouldn't do anything to... I wouldn't now think... I mean, I haven't thought about suicide for ages. But I wouldn't... sorry. I wouldn't do anything to speed it up. But yes, I mean, I do, I suppose I do, yes. I'd be quite happy to go now. I'm optimistic about that, you know.
But Terry, it has to be said, you're beginning to sort of upset everyone around you with these sort of sudden depressions, and like your mum and your lover, they're really worried and a bit confused and frightened by it.
What can I say to them? I mean, all I can say to them is that I need to be me. I need not to think about anybody else in the world at the moment. I'm sorry, but I've never been very selfish.
No.
But what I really need now is someone to do the fighting.
For you?
Yeah, and there's no one.
Did it last weekend?
On Saturday, though, we went to Richmond Park.
Oh, did you? It's lovely out there, isn't it?
We drove around Richmond Park.
All the deers. All the deers, lovely. I used to like that. Michael used to take me out there.
But there is a point, Mum. If I can't do things, if I can't go out, if I can't
yes, I do realise
do the things I want to do, there's no quality to the life.
No,
I mean, life's
true.
only worth
I do
having.
understand that. But then
if there's
you
things
see,
to do.
it's me. Perhaps I'm being selfish. I don't want to know what it's like without you.
But,
so perhaps
it's
I'm
blackmailing me,
That's
isn't
right,
it?
yes. If it keeps you here, yes.
But it's not fair.
No.
One day I might have an actual choice as to whether I carry on taking medications and being kept alive or whether I decide just to go.
Well, that would be up to you then, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but then if you say things like that, then I'd be You're blackmailing
Would you
me into
no,
saying,
I'm not.
yes, I'll carry on.
I don't make you say anything. I mean, I can't make that decision for you.
Yeah, but I can't make the decision without thinking about you and what you think.
Yes, I know.
I can't get over this. I'm going to have AIDS from now until the day I die, Lil.
Yes, I know you are. I'm still going to say fight. I don't care. I'm still going to say fight. I've got to, because he's my son. And I want him with me, you know, as much as I possibly can. But, I mean, he'll only do what he wants to do. I mean, I know my son so well. I mean, I might be saying, you've got to fight, and he might be saying, oh, okay, I'll do what I want underneath. But, I mean, he said, that's enough, and that'll be enough. And I think this is how he'll go. When it comes to the end, I think that is what will happen. He'll just sort of say to himself, oh, I've had enough of this, and he'll curl over and do his tortoise act.
Incredibly, Terry left hospital the next day. He was soon back at Richard Smith's house, where he often babysat for Freddie and James, and called himself the only gay nanny in Clapham.
I mean, he was no plaster saint. He got very moody and bitchy at times. And Terry was a bit of a dilettante. I mean, he did this and he did that, and he rushed around and he had a good time. And somehow in this last 18 months or so when he's had AIDS, he's achieved all sorts of things that perhaps he didn't achieve in other parts of his life to the same extent.
One of those achievements was campaigning for other people with AIDS. 12 days after leaving St Thomas's as a patient, he was back speaking at a press conference for a new AIDS drop-in centre in Lambeth. 150 people saw him in fighting form.
He sat there in the back and he started smoking a cigarette in front of everybody, and I tried to stop him. I said, stop it, don't take that out of my hand. Don't you stop me smoking. When it actually came to his turn, he stood up and he made the most wonderful speech. He stood up hesitantly at first and staggered slightly and was obviously not very well. But then he got into his stride. You know, on with the show, it was definitely that. And he started to harangue the audience about how important this centre was and how great it was going to be for everybody. And he also put in a very nice plug for us and gave a wonderful speech.
HIV infection is something which changes your life unbelievably. I am a weller man today than I was yesterday because I had to be here by 11 o'clock. It was something for me to achieve, and I personally think that we are entitled to the best.
He left that room with the applause ringing in his ears to go and get the results of what he thought was a routine blood test. But he was given the worst possible news at that moment. He was told that the worst possible side effect had happened. He was totally anemic, and that he would have to have a blood transfusion and come off AZT. It was effectively taking away all the hope he had. It was perhaps not surprising that when he rang me the following day to tell me this, that he was really in tears. It was the first time he'd cried to me. He said that it had been the worst day of his life. Still crying, I remember him saying that he'd had a good life. He knew that. I've had a good life, he said. But this isn't living. And yet, the day after that, he went to a tea party with his friends to plan that holiday in the Canaries, booked for the following week. But he would never go on that holiday or reach his 42nd birthday this Christmas Day. 40 hours after this picture was taken, Terry was dead.
I have always asked my lover to be there at the moment of death, if it's possible. And I'd like my mum there because I just want her there. I've not known a moment of my life without her, so why should I die without her being there with me?
I could never think of him as dying until the very last day. It was just, I had so much hope. I didn't realize how weak he was until got downstairs, and at that stage he collapsed and we called the ambulance. He was breathing when we got him to the hospital. We got him to the ward where he'd been for some time. I felt that that was the only place where they would be able to do anything for him. They'd been wonderful to him. Suddenly, he didn't appear to me to be breathing, and the nurses were supposedly fetching the doctor, And I screamed at them to get him. Straight away I didn't appreciate that they had taken his pulse and they thought he was dead by then. I didn't think it possible. I only wish I could have told him one final time that I loved him and how proud I was of him.
I was very, very upset. I didn't expect it to be so soon. Yeah, I think it was a great loss for all of us. But it was exactly the way he wanted it. He spent a long time pleading with me not to let him die in pain. He was very worried about the indignity, about losing his looks by becoming Belson-like, and he was particularly worried about getting the dementia. And he didn't have any of those things, and it was quick and painless. So I'm sure it was the way that he would have wanted it.
Do you think he had any control over that?
I don't know. Terry had control over most things.
Does it have to end like this all the time? How many other mums have got lost lose some? It's just not good enough. It's just not fair. There's so many other rotters walking about that ought to suffer. Thank God he didn't have pain though, did he, Pattie? No. Not really, he didn't have pain. But he just had that knowledge that he was going to die.
Terence Terry Thomas Madeley, born on the 25th of December 1945 in Lambeth, London, to parents John Thomas Madeley and Lillian Martha Truelove, died on the 27th of October 1987, aged only 41. Terry was preceded by his mother, two older sisters Pamela and Diane, and his youngest sister Karen. Terry had a glittering send-off on the 5th of November 1987, attended by mourners dressed in a vibrant array of colours, deliberately avoiding anything black, as per Terry's instruction. The celebration was marked by a lively mix of show tunes and an abundance of floral tributes. The gathering culminated in a champagne reception at Terry's favourite restaurant in Clapham, a fitting tribute that captured the spirit of his life and the warmth he brought to those around him. Remember Terry first aired on BBC Two on the 17th of December 1987 and was met with critical acclaim for its poignant and heartfelt portrayal. Poignant clips that we've just heard from the programme had already resonated with audiences, highlighting the depth and sensitivity of its narrative. The documentary was subsequently broadcast again in the years that followed, most notably on World AIDS Day, 1st of December 1988 on BBC One, where it reached a wider audience and further cemented its importance in raising awareness about the AIDS crisis. Terry's impact was significant in both media and social contexts, reflecting the period's growing recognition of the AIDS epidemic.
We now have two readings from friends.
He sat me down seriously the last time I saw him. He said, "Pattie, I want to talk to you about my funeral. Got it all planned. Who else could have his coffin come into? There's no business like show business and get away with it." So I sat there very seriously and thought, well, this is important. And then he said to me, he said, "But when we go to the Cren," he said, "there's some lovely curtains there." He said, "And I want you to do me a real favour." I said, "Yes, Terry." He said, "When I go in and they close the curtains, could you nip behind the curtains, pop on a black glove, cover it in diamante and stick your hand out for me?" I said, "No, Terry." A friend of his called Stuart, who you may have read, wrote about his story and the fact that he'd got AIDS. I read this to Terry and he said that absolutely summed up what he felt, and he knew Stuart. "I may die of AIDS, I may get run over by a bus, but the problem is not AIDS, and it's not dying, it's living and finding happiness in the struggle. So my death will not be tragic, it will be a celebration of my life."
Terry's mother, Lil, sadly passed away 2 years later in December 1989, but at the time of Remember Terry airing on the BBC, she gave the following interview to London's Evening Standard, where, next to a photo of Lil holding a photograph of Terry, they ran the headline, a helping hand from Mother Courage, where they report. Pensioner Lil Alexander struggled bravely through her tears to talk about her beloved son Terry, who recently died from AIDS. It's only a few weeks since his death, but the 73-year-old great-grandmother is determined to deliver her message that AIDS sufferers should be helped, not rejected. Yes, go Lil. Terry Madeley, a charming outgoing professional actor, was luckier than most who have to break the tragic news to their nearest relatives. Quote, "He knew his mum," says Lil, whose courage had already been tested by the loss of 2 husbands, her own near-fatal heart attacks, and her battle to save the life of her Down syndrome daughter, Karen. Quote, "He knew I wasn't going to throw my hands up and say, 'Oh no, don't come near me.' My first reaction was, what can I do to help? How would my Terry have felt if I'd have turned my back on him? He would have been devastated. I don't think he would have lasted as long as he did." End quote. Unlike many lonely victims, Terry died in St Thomas's Hospital on October the 27th, surrounded by the love of his mother, his 3 sisters, and John, real name Peter, his loyal gay partner of 7 years. He would have been 42 on Christmas Day. His story and Lil's were the subject of Remember Terry, a BBC Two documentary last night, produced and presented by Pattie Coldwell. Pattie fell for both Lil and her son during TV AIDS Week last February, when Terry talked about his illness on her open-air specials. Now she calls Lil, quote, "an amazing lady," end quote, rings her up often, and the relationship between the broadcaster and the retired college cook has become almost like that of mother and daughter. Quote, "That's my Pattie," end quote, says Lil proudly as her face appears on the small portable television perched on the kitchen counter in Lil's Tulse Hill Masonette. Lil herself appeared on the BBC's Day to Day programme and was picked out by host Robert Kilroy Silk as his choice of the year. Quote, "After the Kilroy Silk programme, I was amazed by the number of grown men who came up to me saying, 'I wish you would talk to my mum,'" says Lil. Quote, "It was very sad, but my feeling was, if you can't talk to your mum, how can a stranger do it?" End quote. Her contempt is reserved for those who mount a moral high horse to blame and reject AIDS sufferers. Quote, "They're talking out the top of their heads." End quote. From the time Terry, as a teenage boy, plucked up the courage to reveal he was gay, she was prepared to accept him for better or worse. Quote, "After all, homosexuals have been around for years and years. They haven't just come out of the woodwork just because of AIDS," she says. "If people are that way inclined, they're not going to change, whatever you do." End quote. Most of those who are quick to condemn, she believes, have little experience of suffering or struggle themselves. Certainly she has had more than her fair share. Her first husband died of TB and her second of cancer. After one of her own heart attacks, she officially momentarily died and saw a strange vision of a priest wearing black. She fought a 9-year battle to get major heart surgery for her Down syndrome baby, Karen, after doctors repeatedly turned her away saying nothing could be done. Now Karen, born to Lil at the age of 47, is 27, in the pink of health and living happily at home. She idolised Terry, the flamboyant big brother who did everything in style, even organising his own lavish Hollywood-style funeral for 125 friends and family. But Terry, whose ashes were scattered by Lil and John, real name Peter, at the cemetery near his Clapham home, had his tender, gentle side. It shows in the treasured letter he sent his mother a year ago, just before John took him on the holiday of a lifetime in the Seychelles. It reads, "Dearest Lil, how can I ever begin to tell you how much you mean to me?
You know, don't you, Mum, that you really are the most precious thing in my life. What would I ever do without you? You are strong, brave, generous and beautiful. The beautiful bit gets me. And you give me so much. Oh, so much. Without your support, I might give up. But because you're on my side, I'm strong and brave too. Mum, it may only be a thank you, but it comes from my very, very soul. I love you so much, Terry."
Just a few yards away on the common where he loved to walk, there'll always be a memorial to Terry, his favourite tree. After the party, Peter went there to say goodbye to his partner and our dear friend.
The tree was so important to Terry because it was so beautiful. He wanted to be buried under it or scattered under it. And the common played an important part in his life for quite a few years now, as it has mine. And in that way he would be always close to the common, to nature, and hopefully to me.
You can check out and read all the newspaper articles mentioned in this episode, along with extra snippets of information, on the Extra T blog. You can find the link in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Until the next episode, you can find me on Instagram at The Lost Boys of Soho.